Reform are not shy about this. Like Richard Tice, who's the party chairman, has literally said that their goal is to wipe the Tories in this election. They want to destroy the Tory party and become like the new right-wing face of British politics. What the do they stand for? Well, this manifesto is a joke. It's an absolute joke. On the economy, this manifesto is it's illiterate. It makes absolutely no sense. They're very, very criticized by almost every economics institution that looks at these things. Their predictions are off for each one of these things by margins of tens of billions. One of their policies in here for the NHS, again, I'm going to keep the word incoherent in mind, okay? This is just the most ridiculous suggestion, and there's no elaboration on it. It's just gibberish. Migration. Probably the biggest issue for these guys. This is like their big vote winner. When it comes to stop the boats, they said the Tories aren't being aggressive enough, so I don't know what that means. Does it mean sink the boats instead of stop them? I don't know. It's election day tomorrow, or if you're watching this tomorrow, it's election day today. Congratulations. I hope you know where you're going to vote. Seems very likely that Labour are about to win the largest majority in the UK Parliament since 1832, which is the year of the first ever Reform Act that extended voting rights to people who owned property worth up to about £10 or £2 in other areas. Obviously, pounds were worth a lot more back then. So you suddenly went from a very, very small minority of voters to hundreds of thousands of voters in a country of about 20 million people. But and this is what happened. The Whigs, as soon as you introduced a bunch of new voters, the Whigs, who were to the left of the Tories, just absolutely annihilated. And it looks like this result, 441 seats to 175, is about to roughly repeat itself with Keir Starmer and the Tories. Actually, the Tories are projected to win less than this, most likely. So exciting. And this election has also brought a new party with some old faces. Nigel Farage has been in British politics in the mainstream for a really long time, despite the fact that until now, he has never really been able to gather more than a few percentage points of the votes in his parties. He's never I don't think he's ever won a seat, at least not from my memory. When he was in UKIP, I don't think he won a seat in the British Parliament. They won seats in the EU elections, ironically. He had an EU seat and he was paid for it and everything. But despite that, he still managed to become didn't they win Clacton in 2015? Oh, they might have. Wait, did they? Hang on, wait. UKIP. Clacton 2015. No, yeah, they did. It was Douglas Carswell. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we have Nigel Farage, who wasn't actually going to lead this party campaign at the beginning, but I guess he changed his mind very, very recently. And as a result, it's more or less paid off for them. Like, I think when he started to get involved around here, they went all the way up from about 7, 8, 9%, and all the way up to kind of pushing almost 19 or 20. At some stages, actually getting above the Conservatives, which is insane because the UK is not designed for things like this to happen. The UK is designed for two parties. It's definitely not designed for three parties. It's still not for new parties, but we'll get into that because this isn't actually as big as you might think it is given our voting system. So they've kind of gone up. They were kind of neck and neck with the Tories for a while. And then just recently, and we'll talk about why, they dropped again to 15%. So pretty radical new party coming in. Nigel Farage, in his time in British politics when he was with UKIP, despite them being fairly politically unsuccessful in terms of general elections, still managed to become, maybe alongside Corbyn, the most influential British politician of the last 15, 20 years. He is largely credited for pushing the United Kingdom towards Brexit, for leading the campaign or at least not really leading the campaign, but like at least being a leading voice of the Brexit movement, which I think is fair. I think Brexit probably wouldn't have happened without Farage's influence. He, despite having very few votes and very little seats in Parliament, he would be on question time like all the time. And the reason they're here now is the Conservatives are collapsing massively and right-wing populism is becoming much more popular. And Reform are not shy about this. Like Richard Tice, who's the party chairman, has literally said that their goal is to wipe the Tories in this election. They want to destroy the Tory party and become like the new right-wing face of British politics. Unfortunately for people like Farage, this result might not necessarily do it because we are a first past the post system, which is disadvantageous to smaller parties and to newer parties. So 15% of the vote to 22% still actually means that Reform might only get like 3 seats or between 3 and 15, whereas the Conservatives will get like over 100. So bit of a rip there. It's going to take a while for them to establish themselves as a proper alternative, like the right-wing alternative, but they're definitely going to shape the discourse a little bit. What the do they stand for? Well, their manifesto is 28 pages long. By comparison, Labour's is like 135, Conservatives is just under 100, Lib Dems is just over 100, Greens is like 40, 50. This manifesto is a joke. It's an absolute joke. It's not even, well, first of all, you shouldn't call it a manifesto, okay? It's supposed to be called a contract. They think manifestos are untrustworthy. Contracts are, solid, because he's like a big city trader guy, Farage. But it's not a contract. It's not actually a contract, because you can sue someone if they don't deliver on a contract. I don't think this is a binding contract. And I'd hope not, because it's full of shit. The economics on this, since these are parties that are not really going to have any power and these manifestos won't really mean that much, we're just going to go through the top issues. So in the UK, the top 3 issues for voters, based on the last poll I saw, were the economy first, then the NHS, and then migration. So we'll go over those ones and maybe a few extras. So on the economy, this manifesto is it's illiterate. It makes absolutely no sense. It is rammed with tax cuts and also rammed with public spending increases and also rammed with reductions in public spending. Okay? We'll start with taxes. So for taxes, they want to raise the income tax threshold. I think right now for income tax, you need to be earning about £12,500. They want to push it up to 20,000, which will pull 7 million people out of having to pay income tax. 7 million. They want to raise thresholds for different tax brackets when it comes to corporation tax. They want to get rid of what they call thousands of red tape laws for employers. They haven't actually said which ones, apart from hire and fire. They want to make it easier to hire and fire. So if you're a worker in precarious labor, good luck. They want to withdraw benefits from people after 4 months of being on welfare, like job seekers benefits, and 2 rejected job offers. So if you've been on welfare for 4 months and you reject 2 job offers, you get nothing. You're just left into the wilderness, I guess, into the Wild West. I have no idea like what they expect you to do for food and shelter and everything like that, but that's you. Which is very good for employers who want to pay lower wages. If you have people who are literally forced for fear of like destitution to go into your workplace, you get a lot of bargaining power there as an employer. So all in all, when it comes to these cuts and taxes, they're very, very criticized by almost every economics institution that looks at these things. If you total up their tax cuts, it adds up to 90 billion a year. Their spending increases are up 50 billion a year, and their public spending reductions are 150 billion a year. The problem is when they talk about spending reductions, they summarize it as wasteful spending. That's it. 50 billion a year that they're going to cut from government spending. They just say it's waste. They don't tell you what it is. Now, when I hear that one slightly kooky party full of businessmen and people who support privatization, etc., are saying that they've found 50 billion pounds worth of waste, when the other parties are finding like, 1 or 2 billion, makes me wonder what your definition of waste is. Wasteful according to who? And this is a strategy that UKIP did as well. They would talk about enormous public spending cuts, but they would just label it as waste, which basically means that a lot of services that are definitely not wasteful to a lot of people are going to get destroyed. It's basically a destroy public spending for things that they don't like, and social programs and welfare and educational things and all these kind of extra assets that they just don't like, and they just call it waste. It's a very, very... It seems to work, I guess, because they've been doing this. They've been using this strategy for like over 15, 20 years of just calling it waste. The other problem is, though, with these massive numbers, is that economists have analyzed these, like what they say they're going to do to achieve all these tax cuts and what they say they're going to do to get this extra money. And it seems to be the case that, according to the IFS, their predictions are off for each one of these things by margins of tens of billions. Like the numbers they don't add up even slightly. which takes us to one example, which would be the NHS. In the NHS, they have promised a £17 billion increase on NHS spending, which I'm guessing is funded by, we don't know, increased economic activity because of tax cuts, maybe. Waste taken from somewhere else. Yeah, that's a lot. By contrast, Conservatives are going to increase NHS spending by 1 billion, Labour by 2, Lib Dems by like 5 or 6, Greens by 8, but Reform UK 17 billion extra for the NHS. And their goal is to eliminate waiting lists within 2 years. And despite that massive number for the NHS, the consensus is that if you want to eliminate waiting lists in the NHS within 2 years, waiting lists have never been eliminated from the NHS. They've always been there. You would need a lot more than 17 billion. Like a lot more. It's just a ridiculous promise. It's never going to get met. And where that money is going to come from, we don't know. They just don't say. Waste, apparently. Tax relief, they want to encourage private involvement in the NHS as well, in the health service. So they're giving 20% tax relief on private health and private health insurance. Also fairly questionable, given that it doesn't really gel very well with their NHS policy, because if you're giving tax incentives to private healthcare, then whilst also saying that you're going to improve the NHS, well, you've got mixed incentives. If you give tax relief to private healthcare, then workers are going to move towards private at higher rates. That's the point of an incentive, right? One of their policies in here for the NHS, again, I'm going to keep the word incoherent in mind, okay? This kind of marriage of public and private healthcare, this voucher scheme. The NHS patients will receive a voucher for private treatment if they can't see a GP within 3 days. For a consultant, it would be 3 weeks. For an operation, 9 weeks. Services will always be free at the point of use. This paragraph means it makes no sense. First of all, I don't know what it's like in every part of the country because it depends largely on where you live. You never see a GP within 3 days unless you say that you've got an emergency or something. So this is going to be, as far as I know, it's going to be a lot of people, maybe even most. For me, if I want to get an appointment with my GP in a fairly quiet area, I'm talking like a week, maybe 2 to see a GP. 3 days is not very common. And what's this idea? Receive a voucher. What does that mean? A voucher for private treatment. So somehow, if you're an NHS patient, you don't get your GP appointment, you get a voucher to go private. Okay. Like paid for? If it's free at the point of use, who's paying for this? You have to pay a private health worker to see you. You can't force them to do it for free. So how does that voucher work? Who's paying for it? Because if the government's paying for it, I can't see who else would. If the government's paying for it, then doesn't that mean the government's just paying for your healthcare? Like they would if it was public, but they're paying a private company for it. Like, why? It doesn't make any sense. Unless some people have said that there might be a trick here where they say free at the point of use, meaning that because it's a private system, there might be something in place that means that they bill you later and it's just a scam. It's a scam either way, but yeah, this is just the most ridiculous suggestion, and there's no elaboration on it. I don't even know if I've seen Farage questions on this, but it doesn't make, it's just gibberish. Unless, national service, the national service policy for 18-year-olds. Maybe one of those, it's because it's like military or social services or community stuff. Maybe one of them is actually you just have to be a GP. I don't know. It's ridiculous. Anyway, moving on quickly, just get this horrible party over with. Oh yeah, they did say they wanted to scrap HS2 as well. That's another one. Like, again, when they talk about making savings, there's a problem here. There's a fundamental problem. For example, if I say that I'm going to save 10 billion on job seekers' allowances, welfare for unemployed, you're not necessarily saving 10 billion pounds. That's not how that works. So say you're spending 10 billion pounds on job seekers' allowances, on that system, the welfare system for unemployed, and you take it away. You've taken 10 billion pounds of spending back, but you've also taken tax revenue back as well in some way. Because when you are giving out job seekers allowances, you are not just giving money away and throwing it into a hole where it never comes back. Some of the money goes to employing people who pay taxes, who work in the centers, right? Some of it goes to physical resources, some of which might be taxable. Some of it goes to the actual job seekers themselves, the recipients. And if you're receiving job seekers allowances, definitely, especially, almost all of that money that you get is going to go straight back into circulation. People who people who are on job seekers don't save up. They can't really afford to. So they spend money, and they spend money on goods that have VAT tax on it. And then they spend money in shops where people are making profits and paying taxes on it. So it's not really like a one-to-one. And probably the funniest example of reform making this kind of error is they say that they're going to save something like 27 billion by scrapping HS2, which is a kind of rail network in England. But by scrapping it, they say they're going to save 27 billion because that's half of what was already been spent on it. So HS2 was estimated to cost 54 billion. 27 billion's already been spent on it. So you do the maths, 27 billion left. That means that's how much we're going to save by scrapping it. That doesn't account for all the extra costs that would be involved in scrapping a infrastructure project that is halfway completed, because you're going to have to pay off contractors who aren't doing their entire the full job. You have to pay them off. You can't just say stop now and we'll just stop paying you for the rest of it. These guys are contractors. They wouldn't do that to themselves. And you also have to think about what you're going to spend to repurpose all this half-built rail network. So yeah, this is like, and that's how a lot of their manifesto is. It just assumes that if you take X billion out of this project, that's the exact amount that you're going to save and to spend somewhere else. It doesn't work like that. Lastly, migration. Probably the biggest issue for these guys. This is like their big vote winner, partly because the Conservatives allowed them to do it. The Conservatives came in 2010 promising to cut net migration numbers annually down to tens of thousands. Obviously, that didn't happen. Net migration has always been around like 2, 3, 4, 500,000, roughly in the middle of that. It was really, really high last year, or the year after the end of COVID. Yeah, I don't know why. They kept on promising tens of thousands. They kept on promising 10,000-ish, and then obviously didn't happen. So they've kind of given a big foot in the door for a party like Reform to come in. And their immigration policy is just kind of like what the Tories want, which is already very right-wing, but just all on steroids. They want to freeze non-essential migration completely, despite the fact that migration agencies don't really see that as something particularly necessary. But, they want to make the asylum process even more harsh. They want to basically get rid of it completely. They want to say that anyone who crosses into the UK illegally has to get deported. That's it, which basically means asylum can't really exist. If you want to be an asylum seeker or like claim refugee status, you have a right to come into the country to claim it. You actually have to be in the country to claim asylum. You can't claim asylum from like Sudan. You have to be here to do that. So you have to come here one way or the other. And if you're an asylum seeker fleeing persecution, it makes sense to have it work that way, because if you're fleeing persecution, maybe you can't be expected to grab a passport and fly over. That's the point of persecution or war. It's like these options are limited. So it makes sense for you to actually turn up in the country and then make your claim there. But they just want to get rid of that process completely. So anything to do with the refugee, what's it called? The Refugee Convention that the UK has signed up to, it's just all for nothing. They want to deport people. When it comes to stop the boats, they said the Tories aren't being aggressive enough. So I don't know what that means. Does it mean sink the boats instead of stop them? I don't know. They do want to send people, well, in reality, they said they want to send people back to France. They want to stop the boats and take them back to France. They have never explained, despite being questioned on it, how they would convince the French government to accept that. If you deport someone from your country, there's another country on the other end that has to receive you. I don't know if France, where Le Pen's party just won the first round of elections, is going to be accepting that deal anytime soon. Why would they? Why? So that question is just completely unanswered. Rwanda is another option, but again, they're saying that they can maybe get around that by leaving the European Court of Human Rights. That's one option. But what they seem to be unaware of, or their voters definitely do, is that the European Court of Human Rights was not why Rwanda failed. It's why the first flight to Rwanda was delayed, but the ultimate decision to rule against sending people to Rwanda was from the British High Court. It was a British Supreme Court that voted against it because they said that Rwanda wasn't safe enough. So leaving the European Court of Human Rights might not actually make it all that much easier. Turns out the British Supreme Court is also against people sending migrants to unsafe areas, believe it or not. That's not even in terms of symbolism. That's not even necessarily the worst. The worst of it. Another thing that they want to do is they want to make foreign workers, non-citizen workers, pay a higher rate of national insurance on their taxes. So for citizens, it's 13.8%, but they want it to be 20 for foreign workers. Like they want foreign workers to pay more in taxes, like a higher rate. Even Reform acknowledges the value of healthcare migrants, so they make an exemption for health and care. But for anyone else, they have to pay an extra tax to be here even if you're here with a visa. If you're here with a visa but you're not a citizen, so you can be a resident. You can be a resident with a visa, but not a citizen, and you have to pay extra taxes, extra national insurance. So it's ironic the opinions that people from Reform UK have on like Arabs and Muslims and the Middle East and everything, given that their tax system is more or less inspired by the Ottoman Empire now. Like we're literally going to have a jizya system for for foreign resident workers. But mental, absolutely mental. Yeah, this manifesto it's a complete joke. It's illiterate. It's the parts of it that are understandable are cruel and stupid. Thankfully, first past the post system is not going to reward them with that much. Even though they've got 15% of the vote potentially, they're only going to get like 3, 4, 5 seats. Maybe they'll get double digits if they're very lucky. Yeah, not good. Not good at all. But it's not good that they exist because the Overton window is going to move in their favor. The defeat of the Conservative Party and the rapid growth of Reform. What do you think is going to happen next election? What do you think the right wing are going to do? The right wing seems to know what gains votes, and it's moving further to the right. So not much of an issue this year, but in 4 years or 5 years or another 10 years, maybe. It's also very fortunate that Farage can't really get away with a lot of the same things that Americans can get away with. I find this very, very funny. For example, Trump can talk about grabber by the and like the Mexicans and they're sending and all this shit. Trump can make a million inflammatory statements, like bad moments, and he just kind of chugs along and he sometimes apologizes, but like very half-heartedly, and then just keeps on moving. For Farage, it's very different. British people are they're okay with you being racist, but you have to be subtle about it. We're a very polite nation. So every time there's a scandal where someone from the Reform Party or even UKIP is caught engaging in like racism or homophobia or whatever, Nigel Farage is sometimes he's apologetic. Sometimes he's like, yes, it was abhorrent. We'll get rid of them. I can't stand that behavior. Or he'll just say it was fake. Like it hurts Farage quite badly, actually, to have that kind of publicity, which has happened with Reform as well. Like volunteers and party members have been caught saying slurs and being homophobic or being racist and just being like told, yeah, it's like a very common issue for him because obviously his stances on immigration attract insane right-wing people. It's not only that though, he also interestingly can't really get away with all that much in terms of populism. There are some things for populism that he can get away with, like what do you call it? Like the migration and everything. But for example, when he's being a populist on Putin, when it comes to Putin, Farage has made statements that are kind of supportive of Putin in the sense that he's like made statements of admiration towards Putin. He's later on said that it's more of just like oh, that guy's bad, but I respect him kind of thing. But he does tout the narrative that NATO and the EU is what provoked Russia into the Ukraine war. He's very, very unapologetic about that opinion. The problem is that in the UK, that damages you because when those statements came out, it wasn't that long ago. And he paid for it in the polls. That's why his polling numbers that I showed you at the beginning, that's why they dipped. It seems to be why anyway, because it correlates pretty well. This is around the same time as him saying that NATO and the EU is what got us Russian aggression, like right here. So the reason for that is that in the United Kingdom, and people who oppose Farage were very clever to do this, they compared him to Chamberlain, who appeased Hitler, and had this idea that if we appease an imperialist with expansionist intentions and a fascist, then that'll be the way to quell them, to keep them at bay. That does not work in the UK though, because if you are compared to Chamberlain, everyone in the UK loves Churchill and they hate Chamberlain. Anyone who appears like an appeaser of people with expansionist imperial intentions in Europe doesn't fare very well amongst the left or the right. We still, which suggests that we do still have a more conventional right wing in the country that is moderate enough that statements like that would throw them off. So he suffered for that, and that's a good thing. So, you know, it's funny that like just British moderacy is maybe part of the reason that Farage struggles in the UK. But, you know, they're definitely a force. They're going to probably have an impact on British politics in the next 10, 15 years. But this election, I don't know, it's been a bit of a dud for them, to be honest. So we'll see. Hopefully they don't have an intergalactic surge tomorrow and I look stupid making the segment. Anyway, that's the Reform UK. Good stuff. Boris wanted to be compared to Churchill often. It worked for a bit. Yeah. That the Mearsheimer narrative is not very easy to sell in the UK though, because it sounds like appeasement. And it is drilled very hard into us in our youth to not like appeasement. Appeasement bad is like, we learn descriptive stuff about World War II, but in terms of moral claims, we learn anti-Semitism bad and appeasement bad. That's what we learn. And even the anti-Semitism, it's just Holocaust bad, really. Yeah. Indy, thanks for the tier 1 sub. Just got my uni grades back and very happy. Well, damn right, you're a Lonerbox viewer. I hope you're like a high performance person. You know, just saying. Otherwise, I'd be embarrassed to have you in this community. I'm joking, obviously. Okay. Are you taught about Irish history in British schools? No way. People from the UK know nothing about Ireland. Not through our education system anyway. You have to go out of your way to learn about it. We know more about World War II than we know about Ireland. We know more about Nazi Germany than we know about Ireland, at least from how I was taught. I don't think we did unification of Italy. I don't think we did. No, yeah, we did Ireland, but that was in 5th year history, so you had to choose. That was optional. Yeah. Potato famine came up once. Yeah. Potato blight. And it was all very focused on, like, it was all very much focused on how it happened, like in a physical sense, not in terms of the United Kingdom and their role and their response in it. We don't really get taught that part. Anyway, I'm voting reform. It's really only Islam there's a problem with. It's far too inflexible and domineering. Blacks, Jews, Chinese, anyone more than welcome. David, that's so stupid. Like, how little faith do you have in your country? Britain is a strong country, okay? We are very, very good at absorbing migrants. We've done it better than almost any other country in the continent, okay? Like, you know, when people say we're the least racist country, it's kind of true. Like, we're not great, we're not amazing, we're still racist, and we've still got the problems, but we're not France, okay? We're not Spain, we're not like Poland, Hungary. Off. Yeah, we're all right, actually. Listen, if Israel can survive with a 20% Arab population, and that's an Arab population that has a lot of reasons to hate the state that they live in, so much more than Muslims that live in the UK do. If Israel can handle that, bro, we can handle 6% of our population being Muslim. You. Stop being such a, you know what you are. You're a Britain hater, okay? Imagine the British Empire, the country that faced down Hitler at least between 1942 and 41 and 43, when no other country was, when France folded, when everyone else in Europe was like, this, we're either joining the Nazis or we're staying neutral, when no one else was ready to fight, when people in the UK wanted to appease Hitler further, like Halifax and Chamberlain, Britain, Churchill, we chugged on, okay? We chugged away. Even when the Soviets were getting smashed in Barbarossa. Soviets took down Hitler mostly, not UK. No, Hassan, you idiot. Like, the Soviets were getting rammed all the way to Moscow. They had to get like lend-lease coming, not just from the United States, but also from the UK as well. We had to send tanks and planes to the Soviet Union when they were still fighting in Moscow. Sorry, also, the UK, we decided to fight Hitler in 39 after they invaded Poland. What was the Soviets doing in Poland at that time? What the were the Hang on. What were the Soviets doing in 1930? I forget. Oh yeah, they helped the Nazis DP Poland, and then they engaged in a deal with the Nazis to export all the iron and manganese and oil and all the resources that the Nazis needed to boost their war machine even further. Do you know what the Soviets did when people were warning about an impending Nazi invasion? Do you know what the Soviets did? They, Marxist-Leninists, decided that it was a good idea to just give the Nazis more of what they needed. More of it. to give them more resources because they thought, material conditions. If we give the German capitalist machine everything they need, they'll leave us alone. Oh God, you don't get to take credit for that, Hassan. You don't get to take credit for helping a country with its war machine, helping them break up the continent, and then only fighting after they invade you. Sorry, not even that. Only fighting after they've invaded you, pushed you all the way back to Moscow, and after you've got a bit of help from the UK and America, then you fight back. How many warnings did Stalin ignore? The day before the war, the day before the Barbarossa, the day before the Nazi invasion, a German soldier swam across the river to tell the Soviets that they were ordered to invade the next day, and Stalin had him shot for misinformation. That poor guy. How many thousands, was it 1 or 2,000 German communist refugees, exiles from Germany that were just given back to the Nazis in exchange for Molotov-Ribbentrop? What's your source for the German soldier path? Was German soldier, what, the soldier who deserted? It's from Richard Evans, The Third Reich at War. Everything about this book, everything about what the Nazis were doing before Barbarossa, it's so funny, man. Like, what an absolute state of a regime. Let's see. I love it. Like, how can the absolute tanky cope of the Soviets, they're the real heroes of the war. I'm sorry, you don't get to just help a country, help them break up territory, help them with their war effort to the West, and then only fight back when they invade you. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not very. Is that what an anti-fascist would do? No, but somehow the Munich Agreement, that's the real, at least we do it right. They were preparing for the Nazis. They couldn't fight in 1939 because they weren't ready. Do you know who else wasn't ready in 1939 before Molotov-Ribbentrop, Hassan? Hitler wasn't ready. Hitler was dreading the idea of fighting a war on two fronts without a Soviet assurance. He was dreading it. As soon as he got the green light from Stalin, it was like, all good, based. That's number one. Number two, why were the Soviets so unprepared in 1939? Why was their army in such a state? Why? Was it because Stalin murdered all of his top guys? Yeah, it was actually. Top generals, top commanders, top designers for weapons and shit like that, top architects for designing tanks and things like that. Yeah. Or engineers, sorry. Yeah, he purged all of them because during the 1930s, Stalin was a paranoid fuckhead who decided that he was just going to be the standard Marxist-Leninist who just sees fascism and sees opposition everywhere. He purged all of his top guys. And people in those positions are not easy to replace. Russian Revolution. Hassan, you. The Russian Revolution, or the thing in the 1930s, which was just before Molotov-Ribbentrop. The Soviets did have competent people. They had competent people at the top of their military, at the top of their weapons manufacturing units and things like that. They had all these things, and Stalin killed them all. If they needed 1939 to 1941, if they needed that time to gear up for an invasion, why did they try to invade Finland? That was a pretty bad idea. Anyway, okay, yeah, this is the part from the book here. This is early May, June. This is early May, June, 1941. For context, the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in the 22nd of June, I think, 23rd, something like that. So pretty close to it. What does Stalin do when people are recording endless columns of German troops and vehicles passing through the region of Poland? 14th of June. Just over a week before the invasion. What does Stalin do? Stalin hurriedly launched a futile policy of trying to appease the Germans by stepping up Soviet deliveries of Asian rubber and other supplies under the trade agreement signed in January 1941. As a dogmatic Marxist-Leninist, Stalin was convinced that Hitler's regime was the tool of German monopoly capitalism, so that if he made available everything German business wanted, there would be no immediate reason to invade. Already under the trade provisions agreed under the Nazi-Soviet Pact early the previous year, the Soviet Union was supplying nearly 3/4 of Germany's requirement of phosphates, over 2/3 of its imported asbestos, only a little less of its chrome, over half of its manganese, over 1/3 of its imported nickel, and even more crucially, more than 1/3 of its imported oil. Stalin personally vetoed proposals to disrupt the German military buildup by attacking across the Polish demarcation line. Reports from the Soviet agents and even from members of German embassy in Moscow that an invasion was imminent only convinced him that the Germans were playing hardball in their drive to extract economic concessions from him. That's your guy, bruh. Yeah, that's the book it's from. Richard Evans, Third Reich at War. Oh. I did not defend Stalin. He was pro-Israel. You've been defending Stalin for this entire segment, you idiot. What are you talking about? You're defending the Soviets, right? Who led the Soviets? The Soviets weren't like a pluralistic system where the nation just collectively decides their decisions. They had a supreme leader, Stalin. Was he pro-Israel? The Soviets were the first country to give de jure recognition to Israel in 48. So whatever that's worth. When you defend the Soviet actions in World War II and in Molotov-Ribbentrop, you're defending Stalin. Those were Stalin's decisions. Stalin had executive discretion over every single decision there, right? Okay, sorry. What a waste. Capitalism leads to fascism. All right, sorry. Why do I have people like you can't engage? You're not engaging with anything I'm saying. You're just dropping one talking point after another. Off. Okay.